The cold October rain beat down against the window panes of St. Agnes Convent as Sister Magdalene finished her evening prayers. A soft thud against the heavy oak door startled her from her devotions. She wasn't expecting anyone at this late hour in 1871, especially not in this remote corner of Nevada. When she opened the door, there was no one in sight, just a young woman collapsed on the steps, her cloak soaked through, one hand protectively cradling her swollen belly. Violet Vaughn had traveled over 200 miles to reach Elko, Nevada, running from a past that threatened both her future and that of her unborn child. The journey had taken everything from her strength, her money, and nearly her hope. As consciousness slipped away, she heard a woman's gentle voice and felt arms lifting her from the cold stone. "Lord, have mercy, child. What's happened to you?" Owen Forrester hadn't planned to pass by the convent that night. His usual route from his ranch to town didn't take him past the small stone building nestled at the edge of Elko, but a washed-out bridge had forced him to detour. The storm had hit suddenly while he was checking fence lines in the far pasture, and now he was drenched, tired, and in a foul mood. As he rode his stallion past the convent grounds, a flicker of movement in one of the windows caught his eye. A woman, young, beautiful, and visibly pregnant, was being helped across the room by one of the sisters. He reined in his horse, taking shelter under the overhang of a nearby pine. Something about her face in that brief glimpse, the vulnerability, the quiet dignity despite her obvious distress, struck him. Owen wasn't a man given to idle curiosity, but he found himself unable to ride on. Instead, he dismounted and led his horse toward the convent door. Inside, Sister Magdalene had settled Violet into a small bed in the visitors' quarters. The young woman drifted in and out of consciousness, her breathing shallow, her face flushed with fever. "Hush now," the older nun whispered, placing a cool cloth on Violet's forehead. "You're safe here." A knock at the door drew the sister's attention. She hurried to answer it, surprised to find a tall man with rain-soaked clothes standing there, his hat in his hands. "Forgive the intrusion, sister," Owen said, his deep voice quiet. "I saw a woman being brought in. Is she all right?" Sister Magdalene hesitated, eyeing the stranger carefully. Owen Forrester was known in Elko as a fair man who kept to himself, running his cattle ranch with quiet efficiency. His face, weathered by sun and wind, revealed little, but his eyes, an unusual shade of gray, showed genuine concern. "She's in a bad way, Mr. Forrester. Collapsed on our doorstep not half an hour ago. Fever's taken hold and she's with child." Owen nodded slowly. "I've got a wagon in town. Could bring the doctor out first thing tomorrow if the rain lets up." The sister studied him for a moment longer before nodding. "That would be a Christian kindness. She'll need more help than we can give her here." "I'll be back at first light," Owen promised, settling his hat back on his head. As he turned to leave, he glanced past the sister to where the young woman lay. Even in her weakened state, something about her called to him a feeling he couldn't name and didn't want to examine too closely. When dawn broke, Owen was true to his word. He arrived with Dr. Thomas Wilkes, Elko's only physician. The rain had stopped, leaving behind a world washed clean, the desert air crisp and cool. Dr. Wilkes examined Violet thoroughly while Sister Magdalene hovered nearby. Owen waited in the small anteroom, his hat in his hands, turning it slowly as he waited for news. "Exhaustion, malnourishment, and a touch of pneumonia," the doctor announced when he emerged. "The baby seems strong, but she's in a precarious state. She needs rest, good food, and careful watching. She's about 7 months along by my estimate." "She hasn't said anything about who she is or where she came from?" Owen asked. Sister Magdalene shook her head. "Not a word. No identification on her either, just the clothes on her back and this. She held up a small silver locket. Inside is a pressed flower of violet. When she briefly woke during the night and I asked her name, she just whispered Violet before falling back asleep. Owen nodded, an inexplicable feeling of responsibility settling over him. The convent isn't equipped for this kind of care, is it? We do our best, Mr. Forrester, but no. We're only 3 sisters here and our resources are limited. My ranch is only 5 miles out. I've got a housekeeper, Mrs. Hutchinson, who raised 8 children of her own. She'd know how to care for. He paused for Violet. The doctor and Nunn exchanged glances. It would be better than here, Dr. Wilkes admitted. But Mr. Forrester, taking in a strange woman, especially in her condition. I'm offering her shelter, not marriage, Owen interrupted, his tone brusque. She can stay in the guest room, Mrs. Hutchinson will be with her, and my foreman's wife can help too. It's the Christian thing to do, isn't it? Sister Magdalene studied him with wise eyes. Why, Mr. Forrester? You're known for keeping to yourself. What is it about this young woman? Owen looked away, unable to articulate the pull he felt. Just trying to help, sister. Nothing more to it than that. But there was more, though he couldn't have explained it if he tried. That glimpse of her through the window had stirred something long dormant in him, a protective instinct, perhaps. Or something deeper, he wasn't ready to acknowledge. Violet was barely conscious when they moved her to Owen's wagon, carefully padded with blankets and quilts from the convent. She stirred as they settled her, her eyes fluttering open to reveal irises the color of summer lavender. "Where?" she whispered. "You're safe," Owen said, his voice gentler than usual. "We're taking you somewhere you can rest and get better." She studied his face for a long moment, as if assessing whether she could trust him. Whatever she saw there must have reassured her, because she nodded slightly before closing her eyes again. The journey to the Forrester ranch took nearly an hour, with Owen driving as carefully as possible over the rutted road. Dr. Wilkes rode alongside on his own horse, checking Violet periodically. When they finally arrived, Mrs. Hutchinson was waiting on the porch, her round face creased with concern. "Land sakes, Owen Forrester, what have you gotten yourself into now?" she exclaimed, but her capable hands were already helping to ease Violet from the wagon. "She needs care, Mrs. H. couldn't leave her at the convent." The housekeeper gave him a look that said she didn't believe that was his only motivation, but she held her tongue. "Well, let's get her inside and settled. I've got the blue room ready." The blue room was the largest guest room in the sprawling ranch house that Owen had built 5 years earlier. It faced east, catching the morning sun, with windows that overlooked the rolling pastures and distant mountains. They settled Violet into the 4-poster bed, and Mrs. Hutchinson immediately took charge. "Out both of you," she ordered Owen and the doctor. "I'll get her changed and comfortable. Doctor, you can check on her after." Banished to his study, Owen found himself pacing. This impulsive act of charity was completely out of character for him. Since coming to Nevada 8 years ago, he had built his reputation on being steady, reliable, and uninvolved in other people's troubles. After what happened in Missouri, he had sworn never to let anyone get close enough to hurt him again. So why had he brought a stranger, a pregnant woman with no past he knew of, into his home? He was still pondering this question when Dr. Wilkes joined him an hour later. "She's resting now," the doctor said, accepting the whiskey Owen offered. "Mrs. Hutchinson got some broth into her, which is a good sign. The fever's still concerning, but I've left medicine that should help." "Will she—" Owen stopped, cleared his throat. "Will she and the baby be all right, doctor?" Wilkes considered the question. "Hard to say with certainty. She's young and seems strong despite her current condition. The baby's heartbeat is steady. If we can get the fever down and build up her strength, their chances are good." Owen nodded, relief washing through him. What about the father? She hasn't said anything about him, or about anything else for that matter. Mrs. Hutchinson tried asking a few gentle questions, but the poor girl just turned her face to the wall. Dr. Wilkes studied Owen over the rim of his glass. You're taking quite a risk, Owen. If there's a husband somewhere looking for her. She was left on the convent steps in the middle of a storm, Owen said firmly. Doesn't sound like whoever put her in this condition is too concerned about her welfare. His jaw tightened at the thought. Dr. Wilkes nodded slowly. I'll come back tomorrow to check on her. Send for me sooner if her condition worsens. After the doctor left, Owen found himself drawn to the blue room. He paused outside the door, listening to Mrs. Hutchinson's quiet murmuring as she tended to Violet. When the housekeeper emerged, she seemed unsurprised to find him there. She's sleeping now, Mrs. Hutchinson said quietly. Poor thing's exhausted to the bone. Can I? Owen hesitated, uncharacteristically uncertain. Would it be inappropriate for me to sit with her for a while, Mrs. Hutchinson's eyebrows rose, but she simply said, Nothing improper about watching over someone who's ill. I'll be in the kitchen if you need me. Owen entered the room quietly. Violet lay against the white pillows, her dark hair spread out like a fan. In sleep, the tension had eased from her face, revealing how young she truly was, probably no more than 20 or 21. Her hands rested protectively over her swollen belly, and Owen found himself wondering about the child within. What circumstances had brought its mother to such desperation? He settled into the chair beside the bed, not touching her, just watching the gentle rise and fall of her breathing. Outside, the late afternoon sun cast golden light across the pastures. In the distance, his cattle grazed peacefully, unaware of the strange turn their master's life had taken. Owen wasn't sure how long he sat there before Violet stirred, her eyelashes fluttering against her cheeks. When she opened her eyes fully and saw him, there was a moment of panic before recognition dawned. You're the man from before, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Where am I? My ranch outside Elko, Owen replied, keeping his voice gentle. I'm Owen Forrester. You're safe here, she swallowed with difficulty. Why would you help me? It was a fair question, one he'd been asking himself. You needed help, he said simply. I was there. Violet studied him, wariness in her eyes. People don't usually help without wanting something in return. The bitterness in her voice told Owen more about her past than any explanation could have. I don't want anything from you, Miss Violet, just to see you and your child healthy. Surprise flickered across her face. How do you know my name? You told Sister Magdalene at the convent, and your locket. He gestured to the small silver piece on the bedside table. It has a violet inside. Her hand moved instinctively to her throat, finding it bare. May I have it back? Please? Owen handed it to her immediately, watching as her fingers closed around it with obvious relief. It must be very precious to you. It's all I have left of my mother, she said, then looked startled, as if she hadn't meant to reveal even that much. You don't have to tell me anything you don't want to, Owen assured her, but I hope you'll let us help you, at least until you're well again. Violet's eyes filled with tears she seemed determined not to shed. I don't understand why you're being kind to me. Owen found he couldn't answer, not truthfully. How could he explain that something about her had called to him, that the sight of her through that window had awakened something he thought long dead? Instead, he said, Rest now. Mrs. Hutchinson will bring you some more broth soon. As the days passed, Violet grew stronger. The fever broke on the third day, and with it came a newfound alertness. She still tired easily, but she was able to sit up in bed and take more substantial food. Mrs. Hutchinson clucked over her like a mother hen, bringing her strengthening broths and fresh bread. Owen kept his distance, not wanting to intrude but found excuses to check on her progress. He brought her books from his library when Mrs. Hutchinson mentioned she enjoyed reading and had flowers from the garden placed in her room daily. A week after her arrival, Violet was well enough to sit by the window. Owen found her there when he brought her a new book, gazing out at the ranch land spread before her. "It's beautiful here," she said without turning, "so open and free." "That's why I chose it," Owen replied, coming to stand beside her chair. "Room to breathe." She looked up at him then, her lavender eyes searching his face. "You've been very kind, Mr. Forrester." "Owen," he corrected gently. "Owen," she repeated. A small smile touched her lips, the first he had seen from her. It transformed her face, and Owen found himself momentarily stunned by her beauty. I brought you another book," he said, offering it awkwardly. "Mrs. Hutchinson said you finished the last one." Violet took it, her fingers brushing his. "Thank you. Reading helps pass the time and keeps me from thinking too much." Owen hesitated, then sat in the chair opposite hers. "Sometimes thinking is necessary, though, planning for the future." Her hand moved to her belly in that unconsciously protective gesture he had come to recognize. "My future is uncertain at best." "You could stay here," Owen said, the words emerging before he'd fully formed the thought. "After the baby comes, I mean, until you decide what you want to do." Surprise and suspicion warred in her expression. "Why would you offer that?" Owen struggled to find an answer that wouldn't reveal too much of his growing feelings. "Because everyone deserves a safe place to land when life gets hard." Violet studied him for a long moment. "You're not what I expected, Owen Forrester." "What did you expect?" "Men, in my experience, want something in return for their kindness." Owen leaned forward, meeting her gaze steadily. "I'm not those men, Violet. Whatever happened before you came here, whoever hurt you, that's not who I am." She looked away, her profile delicate against the bright window. "I want to believe that." "Then give me time to prove it," he said quietly. "That's all I ask." That evening, Violet joined him and Mrs. Hutchinson for dinner in the dining room, her first time out of the blue room since her arrival. She wore a simple dress that Mrs. Hutchinson had altered to accommodate her pregnancy, her dark hair neatly braided and hanging over one shoulder. "Well now, don't you look a sight better?" Mrs. Hutchinson beamed, pulling out a chair for her. "Sit down before you tire yourself, dear." Violet smiled shyly at the housekeeper, who had shown her nothing but kindness. "Thank you for the dress. It feels good to be properly clothed again." Owen, who had stood when she entered, found himself unable to look away. Even in her advanced pregnancy, or perhaps because of it, she possessed a luminous quality that drew the eye. When she caught him staring, he quickly looked down at his plate. "I hope you like roast beef," he said. "Mrs. Hutchinson makes the best in the territory." "I'm sure it's wonderful," Violet replied. "I'm grateful for anything that isn't convent soup." The unexpected touch of humor in her voice made Owen look up in surprise. The small smile playing at her lips made something twist pleasantly in his chest. Dinner passed pleasantly, with Mrs. Hutchinson carrying most of the conversation, telling stories of her 8 children now grown and scattered across the country, and her late husband who had been a blacksmith in Missouri. At the mention of Missouri, Owen grew quiet. Violet, more observant than he gave her credit for, noticed the change. "Did you come from Missouri as well?" she asked him. Owen nodded stiffly. "A lifetime ago." Mrs. Hutchinson, sensing his discomfort, quickly changed the subject. "Now, Miss Violet, we need to start preparing for that baby. It'll be here before we know it." "I can't impose on you any further," Violet protested. "You've already done so much." "Nonsense," Mrs. Hutchinson said firmly. "That child needs a proper welcome, and I won't hear of anything less." "Owen, tomorrow you'll need to ride into town and get some flannel for baby clothes." Owen found himself nodding, amused by Mrs. Hutchinson's commanding tone. "Yes, madam." Violet looked between them, bewildered by their easy acceptance of her situation. "I don't understand why you're doing all this." "Because it's the right thing to do," Mrs. Hutchinson said simply. "Now, would you like some apple pie? I baked it fresh this morning." Later, after Mrs. Hutchinson had gone to her own quarters and Violet had returned to the blue room, Owen stood on the porch watching the stars emerge in the vast Nevada sky. He heard the door open behind him and turned to find Violet, wrapped in a shawl against the night chill. "Should you be up?" he asked, concern in his voice. "I've been in bed for a week," she replied. "A little fresh air won't hurt me." She came to stand beside him at the railing. "It's beautiful out here, so many stars." Owen nodded, acutely aware of her presence beside him. "One of the reasons I chose this place. You can see forever." They stood in companionable silence for a while, gazing at the star-strewn sky. Finally, Violet spoke. "I need to tell you why I was at the convent." Owen turned to her. "You don't owe me any explanations." "I think I do," she said quietly. "I need you to understand what kind of trouble might follow me." The protectiveness that had been growing in Owen flared. "Are you in danger? Is someone looking for you?" Violet wrapped her arms around herself. "My name is Violet Vaughn. I came from Sacramento. I was working as a seamstress there when I met a man named James Blackwell. He was charming, handsome, from a wealthy family. He courted me properly at first, but then—" She paused, gathering her courage. "When I told him I was expecting his child, he changed. Said I was trying to trap him, that the baby couldn't be his." Owen's jaw tightened, but he remained silent, letting her continue. "His family has influence in Sacramento. When I tried to get help, no one would believe me over him. He offered me money to go away to take care of the problem, as he called it." Her hand moved protectively to her belly. "I couldn't do that. This child is innocent." "So you ran," Owen said softly. Violet nodded. "I took what little savings I had and headed east. I thought I could make it to Denver, where I have a cousin, but the money ran out in Reno. I worked there for a while, but as I got further along—" She gestured to her swollen belly. "Finding work became harder. When I heard about the Sisters of St. Agnes in Elko, I thought they might help me, at least until the baby comes." "Does Blackwell know where you went?" She shook her head. "I don't think so, but his family has money and connections if they wanted to find me." "They won't," Owen said firmly. "Not here. And if they do, they'll have to go through me first." Violet looked up at him, surprise and something warmer in her eyes. "Why would you take such a risk for a stranger?" Owen found he couldn't lie to her, not when she had been so honest with him. "You're not a stranger anymore, Violet. And I know what it's like to need a fresh start." "Missouri?" she asked softly. He nodded, his eyes on the distant mountains. "I was engaged to a woman there, Elizabeth. Her father was the local banker, mine was a small rancher. Her family didn't approve, but we were in love, or so I thought." The old pain washed through him. "A week before the wedding, I found her with another man, the son of the richest landowner in the county." "I'm sorry," Violet said, genuine sympathy in her voice. When I confronted her, she laughed. Said she had never intended to marry me, that she was just amusing herself until something better came along. Owen's hands gripped the porch railing tightly. "I left that night, rode west and didn't look back. And built all this," Violet said, gesturing to the ranch spread out around them. "Built a life, yes, but kept it simple, no complications. Until I showed up on your doorstep," she said, regret in her voice. Owen turned to her, his expression softening. "I don't regret helping you, Violet, not for a moment." Their eyes met in the starlight, and something passed between them, an understanding, a connection that went beyond words. For a moment, Owen thought he might reach for her hand, but the baby chose that moment to kick vigorously, making Violet gasp. "Someone's awake," she said with a small laugh, her hand moving to the spot. "May I?" Owen asked hesitantly, surprising himself with the request. After a brief pause, Violet nodded. She took his hand and placed it on her belly. The strange intimacy of the gesture made Owen's heart race, but then he felt it a strong, definitive kick against his palm. Wonder spread across his face. "That's amazing," he whispered. "She's strong," Violet said, then added, "or he. I don't know which yet." "Either way, they're going to be just fine," Owen assured her. "You both are." As they stood there under the stars, Owen's hand still resting on the place where new life grew, he knew with sudden clarity that his solitary existence had irrevocably changed. And strangely enough, he found he didn't mind at all. The weeks that followed settled into a routine of quiet domesticity that felt both strange and unexpectedly right to Owen. Each morning, he would rise before dawn to handle the ranch work, returning mid-morning to find Violet and Mrs. Hutchinson engaged in preparations for the baby's arrival. The blue room had been transformed with the addition of a hand-carved cradle that his foreman, Jake, had made, and tiny garments sewn from the soft flannel Owen had purchased in town. Violet's strength returned steadily. Soon she was helping Mrs. Hutchinson with light household tasks, her presence bringing a warmth to the ranch house that Owen hadn't realized was missing. In the evenings, they would sit together in the parlor, Owen reading the newspaper, Violet working on baby clothes, and Mrs. Hutchinson knitting by the fire. It was a simple contentment that Owen had never thought to experience. As Violet's time grew nearer, Dr. Wilkes increased the frequency of his visits. "Everything looks to be progressing normally," he assured them after one such examination. "The baby has moved into position, I'd say within the next 2 weeks." The news brought both excitement and anxiety. Owen found himself checking the weather obsessively, terrified that a sudden storm might make the roads impassable when the time came. "You're worse than an expectant father," Mrs. Hutchinson observed with a knowing smile that Owen chose to ignore. One afternoon, as October gave way to November, Owen returned from town to find Violet in the garden, gathering the last of the late roses. The sight of her, her dark hair loose around her shoulders, her figure silhouetted against the setting sun, made him pull up short. She had never looked more beautiful, more at peace. She sensed his presence and turned, smiling when she saw him. "Welcome back. Did you get everything on Mrs. Hutchinson's list?" Owen nodded, dismounting and securing his horse to the fence post. "Everything except the licorice. The store was out." Violet laughed. "She'll be disappointed. She's convinced it helps with digestion." "I'll ride over to the next town tomorrow if you really need it," Owen offered, coming to stand beside her. "Don't be silly," Violet said, her eyes warm. "It's 20 miles to Carlin," Owen shrugged. "I'd do it if you needed it." The simple declaration hung in the air between them, weighted with more meaning than the words themselves carried. Violet's smile faded as she studied his face. "Why?" she asked quietly, echoing the question she had asked weeks before. But this time, there was no suspicion in her voice, only genuine curiosity. Owen took a deep breath, knowing he could no longer avoid the truth. "Because you've become important to me, Violet, more important than I ever expected anyone to be again." Her eyes widened slightly, but she didn't pull away when he took a step closer. "I know your circumstances are complicated," Owen continued. "I know you came here running from a past you never wanted, but I've come to care for you deeply, and for your child." Violet's hand went to her belly, her expression a mixture of hope and uncertainty. "Owen, whatever she might have said was cut off by a sharp gasp. Her face contorted in pain as she doubled over. "Violet," Owen caught her arms, supporting her. "What is it? What's wrong?" "The baby," she managed between clenched teeth. I think it's time." Owen didn't hesitate. He swept her into his arms, ignoring her weak protests that she could walk, and carried her swiftly into the house. "Mrs. Hutchinson," he shouted. "It's time, send Jake for the doctor." The next hours passed in a blur of activity. Mrs. Hutchinson took charge, transforming the blue room into a birthing chamber with practiced efficiency. Jake rode out for Dr. Wilkes, while Owen was relegated to pacing the hallway outside Violet's room, wincing at every cry of pain that escaped through the closed door. When Dr. Wilkes finally arrived, he gave Owen a reassuring pat on the shoulder before disappearing into the room. First babies often take their time. Try to get some rest. But rest was impossible. As evening turned to night and then to the early hours of morning, Owen remained on his feet, alternately pacing and praying. The sounds from the room, Violet's cries, Mrs. Hutchinson's encouragement, the doctor's calm instructions tore at his heart. Finally, as the first pale light of dawn crept across the eastern sky, a new sound broke the tense silence, the thin, indignant wail of a newborn. Owen froze, his heart pounding. The cry grew stronger, more insistent, and he found himself moving toward the door as if pulled by an invisible force. Before he could knock, it opened and Mrs. Hutchinson appeared, her face tired but beaming. "Congratulations," she said. "You can come in now." Owen entered the room with uncharacteristic hesitation. The curtains had been drawn back to admit the morning light, casting a gentle glow over the bed where Violet reclined against the pillows. In her arms was a small bundle wrapped in one of the flannel blankets he had purchased. Dr. Wilkes was washing his hands in a basin by the window. He looked up with a smile. "Mother and son are doing just fine. A strong, healthy boy." "A son," Owen repeated, the word strangely meaningful on his lips. Violet looked up, her face radiant despite the exhaustion evident in her features. "Would you like to meet him?" Owen approached the bed slowly, as if in a dream. When he looked down at the tiny face nestled against Violet's breast, something shifted irrevocably within him. The baby was perfect, red-faced and wrinkled, with a shock of dark hair that already promised to be as black as his mother's. "He's beautiful," Owen whispered, reaching out a tentative finger to touch the baby's tiny hand. To his amazement, the little fingers curled around his own with surprising strength. Violet smiled, tears of joy in her eyes. "I'm going to call him Daniel. It was my father's name." "Daniel," Owen repeated, testing the name. "It suits him." Their eyes met over the baby's head, and in that moment, Owen knew with absolute certainty that he never wanted them to leave. This woman, this child, they had become his world in the span of a few short weeks. As if reading his thoughts, Violet said softly, "I've been thinking about what you said before." She glanced down at the baby. "About caring for us." Owen's heart quickened. "I meant every word." "I care for you too," she admitted, color rising in her cheeks. "More than I thought possible after everything that happened. But I don't want your pity, Owen. I need to know that what you feel for me isn't just kindness or obligation." "Violet," Owen said, his voice rough with emotion, "what I feel for you has nothing to do with pity or obligation. It's deeper than that, stronger." He took a deep breath. "I think I've been falling in love with you since I first saw you through that convent window." The admission hung in the air between them, honest and vulnerable. For a terrible moment, Owen feared he had said too much, too soon. Then Violet smiled, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I never expected to find love here at the edge of nowhere, but I have, Owen. With you." Owen's heart soared. He leaned forward, careful of the baby between them, and pressed his lips gently to Violet's. The kiss was tender, a promise rather than a demand, and when he pulled back, the love shining in her eyes mirrored what he felt in his own heart. Mrs. Hutchinson cleared her throat pointedly from the doorway. "The new mother needs rest, Mr. Forrester, and so does that baby." Owen reluctantly straightened. "I'll be close by if you need anything, both of you." As he turned to leave, Violet caught his hand. "Owen, thank you for everything." "No," he said softly. "Thank you for bringing life back to this house and to me." The days that followed were a whirlwind of adjustment as they all adapted to the presence of the tiny, demanding new person in their lives. Daniel proved to be a healthy, vocal baby with a strong appetite and a distinct dislike of being put down for too long. Mrs. Hutchinson declared him a proper handful, just like my Thomas was, which she clearly meant as high praise. Owen found himself captivated by the baby. He would stand over the cradle watching Daniel sleep, marveling at the tiny perfection of his features, the miniature fingernails, the way his little chest rose and fell with each breath. When Daniel was fussy, Owen discovered he had a talent for soothing him. The deep rumble of his voice reading aloud seemed to calm the baby instantly. 2 weeks after Daniel's birth, Owen rode into town to post letters and pick up supplies. As he tied his horse outside the general store, he noticed a stranger examining the notices pinned to the town bulletin board. There was nothing unusual about that. Elko saw its share of travelers passing through, but something about the man's expensive clothes and the way he studied each paper intently put Owen on alert. He entered the store casually, nodding to the proprietor, Tom Marshall, as he handed over his list of supplies. "Who's the dandy outside?" he asked quietly. Tom glanced toward the window. "Came in on the morning stage from Reno. Been asking questions all over town about a young woman. Dark hair, violet eyes, in a family way." Tom gave Owen a meaningful look. "Sound familiar?" Owen's blood ran cold. "Blackwell or someone working for him." "What did you tell him?" "Not a thing," Tom said firmly. "None of us did. Elko takes care of its own, Owen, and that girl of yours is one of ours now, far as we're concerned." Gratitude washed through Owen. "Thanks, Tom, I owe you." "Just invite us all to the wedding," Tom replied with a wink. Owen collected his supplies quickly, his mind racing. He needed to get back to the ranch to warn Violet, but as he stepped out onto the boardwalk, he found himself face to face with the stranger. "Excuse me," the man said smoothly. "I wonder if I might have a word." Owen sized him up coolly. Expensively dressed, with the soft hands of someone who'd never worked a day in his life, but there was a hardness in his eyes that spoke of determination. "I'm in a hurry," Owen replied tersely, moving to step around him. The man shifted to block his path. "It will only take a moment. I'm looking for someone, a young woman named Violet Vaughn. I have reason to believe she passed through this area recently." He withdrew a photograph from his coat pocket. "Perhaps you've seen her." Owen glanced at the picture. Violet, younger and more carefree than he had ever seen her, but unmistakably the woman he had come to love. "Can't say that I have," he lied easily. "Why are you looking for her?" The man tucked the photograph away. "Family business. She's expected back in Sacramento." "Family, huh?" Owen's voice hardened. "Interesting. She told me she had no family left." Too late, he realized his mistake. The man's eyes narrowed. "So you do know her?" Owen straightened to his full height, using the few inches he had on the stranger to advantage. "I know that a woman has the right to go where she pleases without being hunted down like an animal. I know that if she left Sacramento, she probably had good reason." "This is none of your concern," the man said coldly. "Miss Vaughn is carrying a child that belongs to a prominent family. They have rights." "Rights?" Owen's temper flared. "A man who abandons a woman carrying his child has no rights to that child or its mother." The man's expression shifted to one of calculation. "Perhaps we could come to an arrangement. The Blackwell family is prepared to be generous." "Name your price for information on Miss Vaughn's whereabouts." Owen's fist connected with the man's jaw before he had consciously decided to throw the punch. The stranger staggered back, stunned by the sudden violence. "That's my answer," Owen growled, lowering his voice so only the man could hear. "Now get out of my town before I decide to give you a proper Nevada welcome." The man straightened, touching his jaw gingerly. "You've made a serious mistake, Cowboy. The Blackwells don't take kindly to interference." "Neither do I," Owen replied. "And unlike them, I don't need to hire someone to fight my battles." A small crowd had gathered, drawn by the confrontation. Tom Marshall stepped out of his store, shotgun in hand. "Everything all right here, Owen?" "Just fine, Tom. This gentleman was just leaving." Owen stared hard at the stranger. "Weren't you?" The man glanced around at the unfriendly faces surrounding him and seemed to reconsider his options. "This isn't over," he said quietly before turning and walking stiffly toward the hotel. Owen wasted no time. He loaded his supplies quickly and rode hard for the ranch, pushing his horse faster than usual. When he arrived, he found Violet in the garden, Daniel sleeping in a basket beside her as she hung laundry on the line. The domestic tranquility of the scene, his home, the woman he loved, their child, for he had come to think of Daniel as his own, intensified his determination to protect them at all costs. "Violet," he called, dismounting quickly. She turned, smiling at the sight of him, but her expression changed to concern as she read the tension in his body. "What's wrong?" Owen took her hands in his. "Someone's in town looking for you, a man working for the Blackwells." Violet paled, her eyes darting to the sleeping baby. "How did they find me? I don't know, but he has your photograph and he's been asking questions." Owen squeezed her hands gently. "No one in town told him anything. They're on our side." "He'll keep looking," Violet said, her voice tight with fear. "They won't stop Owen. They have too much pride, too much to lose if word gets out about what James did." "I won't let them take you or Daniel," Owen promised fiercely, "but we need to decide what to do." Violet glanced toward the house. "I should leave. Tonight. It's not fair to bring this trouble to your door." "No," Owen said firmly. "Running isn't the answer, not anymore." He took a deep breath. "Marry me, Violet." She stared at him, clearly caught off guard. "What, marry me?" he repeated. "Today, if possible. As my wife, you'll have my protection in the eyes of the law, and Daniel will have my name." "Owen, I can't let you do this just to protect us." "You think that's the only reason I'm asking?" Owen cupped her face gently in his hands. "I love you, Violet. I want to spend my life with you, raise Daniel with you, maybe have more children someday." "I was going to ask you anyway, had a whole speech planned for when the time was right, but the time is now." Tears filled Violet's eyes. "I love you too, but are you sure? Taking on another man's child, the scandal that might follow." "I've never been more sure of anything," Owen said. "Daniel is yours, which makes him mine too as far as I'm concerned. As for scandal," he shrugged, "let them talk. We know the truth." Violet searched his face, finding nothing but sincerity and love. Slowly she nodded. "Yes, yes, I'll marry you, Owen Forrester." The relief and joy that swept through Owen was overwhelming. He pulled her into his arms, mindful of her still healing body, and kissed her with all the love he felt. A soft cry from the basket reminded them they weren't alone. Violet laughed against Owen's lips, then pulled away to pick up the now awake Daniel. "I think he approves," she said as the baby's cries subsided once he was in her arms. Owen touched the soft, dark hair on Daniel's head. "Smart boy, just like his mother." They were married that same day in the parlor of their home, with Reverend Phillips from the local church officiating. Mrs. Hutchinson stood as witness, along with Jake and his wife, Sarah. Daniel slept peacefully in Mrs. Hutchinson's arms throughout the brief ceremony. Violet wore a simple blue dress that brought out the color of her eyes, with wildflowers from the garden in her hair. Owen thought she had never looked more beautiful than when she spoke her vows in a clear, steady voice, her eyes never leaving his. "I now pronounce you man and wife," Reverend Phillips declared. "What God has joined together, let no man put asunder." When Owen kissed his bride, sealing their union before God and their small circle of friends, he felt a sense of rightness that surpassed anything he had experienced before. This was his family. This was his future. The celebration that followed was modest but joyful. Mrs. Hutchinson outdid herself with a wedding supper that included all of Owen's and Violet's favorite dishes. Jake brought out his fiddle, and Sarah played the piano that had stood largely unused in the parlor since Owen purchased it years before. They danced, laughed, and toasted to new beginnings. As evening fell, their guests departed, leaving the newlyweds alone with their sleeping son. Owen gathered Violet into his arms, overwhelmed by the knowledge that she was now his wife. "Mrs. Forrester," he murmured against her hair. "I like the sound of that." Violet smiled up at him. "So do I." "Are you happy?" he asked, suddenly needing to hear her say it. "Happier than I ever thought possible," she assured him. "You've given me everything I never dared hope for, Owen, a home, a family, a love I can trust." He kissed her then, a kiss full of promise for the future they would build together. When they parted, Violet rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "What happens now?" she asked quietly. "With the Blackwells, I mean." Owen's arms tightened around her. "Now we face them together, as a family." The confrontation came sooner than expected. The next morning, as Owen and Violet sat on the porch enjoying the sunrise, Daniel nursing contentedly at his mother's breast, a cloud of dust on the horizon announced approaching riders. Owen recognized the lead rider, instantly the man from town. Behind him rode two others, clearly hired guns by the look of them. "Stay here," Owen told Violet, his voice calm despite the tension coiling within him. "Owen," she began, fear in her eyes. "It's all right," he assured her. "Remember what the Reverend said yesterday. What God has joined together, let no man put asunder. I intend to uphold that promise." He stepped off the porch as the riders approached, positioning himself between them and his family. Jake emerged from the bunkhouse, rifle in hand, and took up position to Owen's right. The riders pulled up several yards away. The lead man dismounted, eyeing Owen with barely concealed hostility. "Mr. Forrester," he said coldly, "I see you've been harboring my employer's property." "I don't see any property of your employer's here," Owen replied evenly. "Just my wife and son." The man's eyes narrowed. "Wife, as of yesterday." Owen held up his left hand, showing the simple gold band Violet had placed there. "Legally married by Reverend Phillips of the Elko Methodist Church with witnesses present." The man's face tightened with anger. "A convenient arrangement. But it doesn't change the fact that the child is a Blackwell. My employer wants what's his." "Your employer," Owen said, his voice dangerously soft, "rejected both mother and child. He has no claim here. That's for the courts to decide." The man reached into his coat and produced a folded document. "I have papers here demanding that Miss Vaughn, Mrs. Forrester," Owen corrected, "return to Sacramento with the child for paternity proceedings." Owen didn't take the papers. "Your employer abandoned his responsibilities." "I've accepted them. The baby has my name now, legally recorded in the county register. As for my wife, she goes nowhere she doesn't wish to go." One of the hired guns shifted in his saddle, his hand moving toward his holster. Jake raised his rifle slightly in response. "I wouldn't," Owen advised the gunman calmly. "My foreman was a sharpshooter in the war. He can put a bullet through your eye before you clear leather." The Blackwell agent glanced at his companions, clearly reassessing the situation. "The Blackwells have influence even in Nevada, Forrester. They can make things very difficult for you." "Perhaps," Owen acknowledged, "but they should consider what I can make public. A prominent Sacramento family abandoning a pregnant woman, sending thugs to intimidate a legally married couple." He shook his head. "The newspapers would have a field day." "I doubt that's the kind of attention the Blackwells want." Uncertainty flickered in the agent's eyes. This clearly wasn't the scenario he had prepared for. "I suggest you take a message back to your employers," Owen continued. "My wife and son are under my protection now. Any attempt to separate them from me will be met with the full force of the law and public opinion. The Blackwells may have money and influence, but I have truth and justice on my side. Ask them which they think will prevail in the court of public opinion." The agent studied Owen for a long moment, measuring his resolve. Whatever he saw there must have convinced him, because he slowly replaced the papers in his coat. "This isn't over," he said, but there was less conviction in his voice now. "It is if the Blackwells are smart," Owen replied. "Tell them to leave us in peace and we'll do the same for them. That's the only offer they're going to get." The agent hesitated, then nodded curtly. Without another word, he remounted his horse and signaled to his companions. They turned and rode away, dust rising behind them as they disappeared down the long drive. Owen watched until they were out of sight before returning to the porch where Violet waited, clutching Daniel protectively to her chest. "Are they gone?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. Owen sat beside her, putting his arm around her shoulders. "For now, and I think for good. Men like the Blackwells don't risk public scandal. Once they realize we're willing to fight, they'll back down." "How can you be so sure?" "Because they have more to lose than we do," Owen said. "We have everything we need right here." Violet leaned against him, the tension gradually leaving her body. "I was so afraid they would take him from me." "Never," Owen promised. "No one will ever separate this family." As if understanding his father's words, Daniel made a soft cooing sound. Owen looked down at the tiny face and felt a surge of fierce protectiveness. In that moment, he knew he would move heaven and earth to keep his wife and son safe. "He needs a middle name," Violet said suddenly, smiling up at Owen. "Daniel Owen Forrester. What do you think?" Owen's heart swelled with love and pride. "I think it's perfect." The Blackwells never came back. Whether it was Owen's threat of publicity or simply the realization that the legal battle would be more trouble than it was worth, they retreated to Sacramento and left the Forresters in peace. Spring came to Nevada, bringing new life to the ranch. The cattle thrived, the garden bloomed, and Daniel grew stronger each day. His dark hair and violet eyes, so like his mother's, drew comments whenever Violet took him into town, but no one ever questioned his parentage. To everyone in Elko, he was Owen Forrester's son, through and through. One warm May evening, as Owen sat on the porch watching the sunset with Daniel sleeping against his chest, Violet joined him with a mysterious smile. "I have news," she said, sitting beside him and taking his free hand in hers. Owen looked at her expectantly. "Good news, I hope, the very best." She placed his hand on her still flat stomach. "We're going to have another baby." Joy burst through Owen like a sunrise. "Really? Are you sure?" Violet nodded, her eyes shining. "Dr. Wilkes confirmed it today. In December, Daniel will have a little brother or sister." Owen pulled her close, careful not to disturb the sleeping baby between them. "I didn't think I could be happier than I already was, but you keep proving me wrong, Mrs. Forrester." "I told you once that my future was uncertain at best," Violet said softly. "But you gave me certainty, Owen. You gave me a home." "You gave me so much more," Owen replied, his voice thick with emotion. "You gave me a family, a purpose, a heart that knows how to love again." As they sat together watching the last light fade from the Nevada sky, Owen reflected on the strange twist of fate that had brought them together. A detour on a stormy night, a glimpse through a convent window, small moments that had changed the course of his life forever. He thought of the lonely man he had been before Violet and Daniel came into his life, and he was profoundly grateful for the joy they had brought him. Whatever challenges the future held, they would face them together, as a family bound by love and choice rather than mere blood. In December, as promised, Daniel welcomed a little sister into the world, Emma Rose Forrester, named for both grandmothers neither child would ever know. She had Owen's gray eyes and a dusting of dark hair that promised to be as black as her mother's. As Owen held his daughter for the first time, with Daniel peering curiously at his new sister from Violet's arms, he knew with absolute certainty that his life was complete. From the depths of loneliness, he had found his way to this moment of perfect happiness, a beautiful wife who loved him, a son who bore his name if not his blood, and now a daughter who carried part of him into the future. "Thank you," he whispered to Violet, who smiled tiredly up at him from the bed. "For what?" she asked. "For finding your way to that convent, for letting me find you." Violet's eyes filled with happy tears. "I think we found each other exactly when we needed to." Owen couldn't have agreed more. In this remote corner of Nevada, far from the places that had caused them both pain, they had built something precious and enduring, a love strong enough to overcome the past, a family bound by choice and commitment, a home filled with joy and promise for the future. And it had all begun with a desperate young woman left at a convent door, and the cowboy who saw her through the window, a moment of chance that had become their destiny.